So in today's video, we're going to build an approval workflow using Google Forms for the input, Google Sheets to manage the data, and then we'll send emails with a button to approve or deny the request. So let's go ahead and create the Google form. So create a new form, and then we can add new questions here. So we can change the settings here. And so if we want them to upload a PDF or an image of a invoice or a receipt, then what we'll want to do is do verified. Otherwise, we can just do responder input. I'm going to show how to add a invoice. So we'll go ahead and do verified. And then here, we'll just put in some things here like your name, and then we can duplicate the question. Let's go ahead and add a department, and I'll show you how to route requests if need be, or you can just send them all to the same person. And so we'll just go ahead and do warehouse, office, sales, and then we'll go here, add purpose, so they can type in what the request is for, and then the amount. So again, this can be short answer, and we can do a little validation and make sure that this is a number. And so we'll just do is number. So that way they're not entering in $3,500 and putting dollars in text. And so she'll keep it like that. And then finally, let's duplicate again. And this time we're going to do a file upload. And so here's that responders required to sign in Google, and that's just for security reasons. So we'll do invoice or receipt. And then you can determine if you only want specific file types, which in this case would probably be PDF or an image, but you can uncheck that if you don't want it to. And then if you need to be able to support multiple files for them, in this case, we're just going to do one. And then here also maximum file size if you think they're going to be uploading some bigger ones. And then if you ever need to view those, you can go to that view folder. All right, so this should be good for our Google form. So let's go ahead and publish this. And here's where you can manage and share it with who you need to. I'm just going to go ahead and publish here. And then let's copy that responder link, and we'll open that up here. And at this point, we don't need this for the moment, so we'll close that down, and then we'll go back here. And then next, let's set up the Google Sheet real quick. So we'll just call this requests. And so we'll just let all the requests wind up here, and then we'll flow them through. We'll call this pending, approved, and denied. And so let's just go ahead and copy these headers over here. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-V or Command-Shift-V if you're on a Mac. And then for pending, let's do maybe blue. We'll just kind of color code these a little bit. So blue, change a little bit here. And then let's go ahead and wrap this. And then here, so we have timestamp. Let's go ahead and change this to ID because we're going to use this timestamp as an ID. So I'm going to repurpose it. And then let's just paint this format over, and we'll just say request sent. And so we'll add a timestamp there. And then let's go ahead and remove the rest of these. So hold down Shift, right click, and delete columns. And then let's go ahead and just copy these, and we'll copy this over to approved, and then a request sent. And then here we'll do approved date and then paid date. And so this will just give us a way to enter a date if it's been approved, that it's been paid out. So let's go ahead and remove the rest of these columns real quick here. And then we'll do the same thing here, except we don't need this paid. So we'll just do this and that. And then this will be denied date there. And then we can get rid of the rest of these columns. There we go. And then let's change this maybe to this. That. This one will change to green. There we go. So now we have the Google Sheet in order. And so next we need to do our app script. So let's go ahead and open up our app script, extensions, and app script. So we'll go ahead and call this approval workflow. And then we got basically two things we need to do here. So the first off is every time the Google form is submitted, we want to grab this data and then email it to whoever is going to be approving this request. And then from that email, they need to be able to click approve or deny, and then each come back here. And then what we're going to do is we'll move it to pending. So pending will be once it's been emailed. And then we need to move it from pending to approved or denied based on that response. So the first thing is when the Google form is submitted, we need to email that data. And so let's start with that. And so we'll call this send request. And because we're going to be using this whenever the form is submitted, I'm going to put E in there for the event object. And we're going to get the data from that. We'll do let response e.values. And so what this is going to do is it's going to give us whatever is submitted. So whatever would show up in this row in this same order. And so let me get rid of the rest of these columns here. There we go. So we can just align with these columns and go from there. So let's go ahead and get those things. So we're going to get that ID. And so that ID, we're going to take that timestamp and we're going to convert it to a number. And the way we'll do that is by get time on our date. And so ID, we'll do new date, and then we'll do response. And the first response will be 0. This will be the first column. So it starts at 0, 1, and so forth. So it's kind of weird, but that's the way it works with this arrays. So there's our new date. And then we're going to do get time, just like that. And then we're going to use this response to copy over to pending here in a second. So I want to put this back into our response. And so response 0 is equal to ID. And so that's going to update in here what we just did. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. So we're going to get some variables here. So our requester email, and then we'll just go through and get these here. So email address, name, department, purpose, amount, and that invoice receipt. All right, so now we got those variables. So we want to send an email, and this invoice receipt is going to come through as a link. And so I want to convert that into an actual file. And so what I'm going to do is let file ID, and then we're going to take that receipt and we're going to use this match, and then we're going to use a little regex. So I'm not really going to explain too much, but basically what we're going to do is come up with any alphanumeric where it's 25 characters or more. And that's basically going to take, something like this. It's going to find this long string, where there's a long string together, and it's going to pull that out. And then we're going to be able to access that. So when you do a match, we need to get the first element from it. So just like our arrays up here, the first element is actually going to be 0 inside brackets. And so now we can actually get our file. And so this is going to be drive app, get file by ID, and then file ID just like that. So now we have everything we need to start making our email. So if we wanted to route based on department, we could add an object. Otherwise, we could just do let email to, and then whatever email here. So this would be the simple way. I'm going to show you how to route based on department heads. And then we're going to create an object, and then we need to have one for each option. So the options were warehouse, office, and sales. So warehouse, and then we can put that warehouse email here. And so I'm just going to put my own email in here, but you could put whatever email for each of these department heads. So warehouse, and this will be sales, and this would be office. And then I'm going to get rid of that last comma. So we only need a comma to separate each of these, and then this will be good. So at this point, however many departments that you could have a different email address for each, or some of them could share emails. And what this will do is it's going to send it to that email. So instead of putting this here, what we're going to do is departments, which is our object here. And then we're going to use our bracket here, and then we're going to do department. So this may be a little confusing. So if you want a little more differentiation, you can do department heads, something like that. If you want to be a little different, so we could do something like that, and it makes it a little more obvious that those are different. So then we can do let subject, and then here I'm going to do backticks. So backticks is right above the tab key on my keyboard, and it allows us to use what's called template literals, which is a $ and curly braces. And we can put a variable. So a variable is one of these things here. We can put it inside of our string. So for example, we can say expense approval request for, and we could do amount from requester name. Now, one thing that's going to happen, so we may want to compensate for this, is that the amount is going to come through just as a number. So for example, it's going to be like 3,500 or something like that. And so we may want to make this a little more friendly, but we'll show that here after a little bit once we get going. So let's do our email body next. And then again, I'm going to do backticks, and then I'm going to say, here are the details. And then I'm going to use a little bit of HTML in here. So these BR, the angle brackets, BR and /, this is a new line. And so this will give us 2 new lines. And so it'll give us a little bit of space. And then down here, we can do strong or bold. And then we'll do requester, and then close our bold. And then we can put in our requester name, and then BR for a new line. I'm going to put our little N here on a new line, and then I'm going to copy this, and then we're going to make a couple rows here for our different things we're going to include. So if we are emailing it to the department head, we could leave out the department, but we could add it here if we want to. So department, and put that in here, department there, and then purpose and amount. And then change those right there, purpose and amount. All right. And so now what we need to do is we need to add a button. So before we add a button, let me add one more new line here. And then what we need to do is do a link. So the link, the way this is going to work is we're going to create a web app. And so we're going to do that through an deployment here in a minute. So I'm going to create a placeholder. So we're going to do webhook, and then I'm just going to leave blank string there for now. So that webhook, we're going to drop that in here. And then we're going to add some stuff, some info, so that way we can track it back. So that button, they're going to click on it, and that button is going to send some data back to a webhook that we're going to create in a minute. And so we need to add something like the ID. And so the way we're going to do that is after the URL, we're going to add a question mark, and then we can add some parameters. So these are called query parameters. And so ID, and then we created our ID. So there it is right there. So we're going to put that in here. And then we need to determine, is this approved or denied? And so I'm going to add another parameter. And so I'm going to do ampersand, and then status equals approved. And so this will be our approved one here. And I'm going to copy this, paste, and then this will be denied. Just like that. So the way these links work, and that's what this HTML is we need to close that link like this, but we can put a button inside this. So we could just put approve text and deny, something like that. But I want to put this inside of a button to make it look a little bit nicer. And so let's do button, and then we can close that button here, and then do the same thing here, button, and close that button. And one thing that you could do as well is you could copy this whole thing into ChatGPT and ask it to make this a little more streamlined. You could maybe ask it to use Bootstrap, something like that, to make this look a lot nicer. And so I might show you that here at the end, but let's just continue with this for now. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit of style here, background green, and then let's do the same thing here. We'll turn this one red, just like that. And then let's add another new line just at the end. All right, so there's our buttons. So approved and denied. It has a placeholder for our webhook with ID and then our status. And so now we just need to send this. So mail app, send email, and then we're going to use a object inside of here. And so if you look here, it has things like to, subject, HTML body. And so let's go ahead and do that. So to, and that will be our email to right here. So email to, and then comma, subject, and then our subject right there. And then HTML body, and then email body. And then we need to do attachments. And then we're going to put that into an array. And so there's our file right there. So we can just put file, and there we go. So one more thing we want to do here is this is assuming a new response has been made. So a new row has been added. But we want to add it to this pending just so we can easily track where it is in the process. So over here, maybe we'll do it before we send the email, just to make sure we don't have any issues. So we'll do let, we have not accessed the spreadsheet yet. So SS, spreadsheet app, get active spreadsheet, and then let sheet. And then we'll get this pending sheet here. So that would be SS, get sheet by name, pending. And then we want to get today's date in there. So we'll do today. And then we're going to do this utilities format date method and then create a new date just like that. And then I'll use the spreadsheet for the time zone. So spreadsheet time zone, just like that. And then finally, here's the format we can use. And so they have samples here of what it looks like. I'm going to do month, day, year, and then I'm going to do 1H for a 12-hour day, and then minutes, and then A for AM, PM. All right. So we have our response. So what that response is going to look like is something like this with our, well, after this, it's going to be our ID, email, name, and so forth, because ID, email, name, and so forth. So when we come over here, we have that request sent is at the end. So I can add that to this by using a method called push. So response push today. And what that'll do is in here, it's going to add one at the end with today's date. All right. So then sheet, we can do append row and it'll add it at the bottom. Or should we do it at the bottom? Do it at the bottom, maybe at the top. Let's do it at the bottom. And then the rest I think we'll do at the top. So response, just like that. And then we can send that email. All right, so we'll test this in a second, but I want to build out our web app as well. Let's go ahead and do that. So here we're going to do function do get. And so it has to be just like this, do get with this E. And then what we're going to do is this E is where we're going to access that stuff we put over here, those parameters. So ID and status. And so the ID is how we're going to find it. And then status determines where it's going to go. And so let's come back up here. So we'll get that using parameters and then e.parameter. And so that's going to tell us that we need to get that stuff from the link. And then we can do let ID equals parameters.id. And then let status equals parameters.status. And so you could add even more data if you needed to inside this URL. And you would just do that using an ampersand and then whatever else you want to call it. You could do name, you could do whatever there. But this was enough for us to get going. We have our ID and our status. And so now we can go back to our spreadsheet. So we'll do the spreadsheet app again, and then we'll get our pending sheet again. And this will be get sheet by name pending. And so one thing I'm going to do real quick here is when we convert this timestamp, so we're taking the timestamp and convert it to a number. So when we drop it here, it's going to natively convert it to a number. It's going to read it as a number. Now, when we do this parameters and pull that ID, it's going to default to text. And so if I pull whatever IDs from here, and then I'm trying to compare it to the, they clicked on the button and it brought them back to this, I'm trying to compare text to a number. And so it doesn't play very well. So what I'm going to do here is pending get range. I'm going to just convert that A column, set number format, and I'm going to do this at. And what that's going to do is it's going to convert this to strings. So then we don't have to deal with that number versus string nonsense. All right. So now we can get our IDs. So pending IDs, and then we're going to go pending get range. And then we can just do our A2 to A, get values dot flat. And so dot flat is going to change it from a 2D array to a single array. And that's just going to make it easier to iterate. So let index equals pending IDs, index of ID. And so what this is going to do is determine in our list of IDs, what index number is it? And so let's say it found it here in row 6. So index of is this whole array numbering, which starts at 0. And we're starting in row 2. So this would be 0. So if we came down here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if that was where our ID was from our email, it would return index of 4. And so when we go back to this, we need to add that 2 back. And so let's get that data. And that's going to be pending get range index plus 2. And now we can get our first column. And then there's a number of rows, so 1, and then number of columns. And so I'm just going to dynamically get this. So get last column just like that. And then get values. And then again, I'm just going to do dot flat to change it to a single array. So the difference between single and double array is if I didn't do this dot flat, then it would look like this, and our data would be in here, and it'd be ID and so forth. And so I'd have to get inside this one first and then this one. So if I do that flat, it gets rid of that outside one and it just looks like this. All right, so now we have our data from our pending and we have our status. So now we just need to move it. Is it approved or is it denied? And so that is right here in the status. And so it happens to coincide to our tab names, so approved and denied. And so if that's the case, I can just do let target sheet. Let's make sure I get that spill right there. Is get sheet by name, and I could do status. Otherwise, I could do something like if status is equal to approval or something like this. And then in that case, what I want to do is like this. Let me just show you real quick. The target sheet, and then I'd do target sheet equals, if I can get these brackets in here correctly. I could do approved, and then I could come down here, and if it's denial, then I could do denied, and I could keep doing these if I have more. So that's how you do it if you had that. And then basically what I'm doing is I'm declaring that variable here, and then I'm assigning it here. And so you may think, well, why can't I just do it like this? The reason why is because outside of this if statement, when you declare it in here, it's not accessible out here. And so if we came down here and, got rid of this and came down here and said target sheet, it wouldn't be able to access it. So let me go ahead and we'll just go back a little bit here. There we go. So there's our target sheet. And so I think what I'll do here is when we go to approved or denied, I think I'll just add it at the top instead of adding at the bottom. So the pending it should be cycling through and either getting approved or denied. So it shouldn't be sitting here very long. And so what we'll do here, target sheet, and then we'll do insert row before, and we'll just do row 2. So row 2 would be here. So it'll just insert a new row above and add it right there. So it's gonna be very easy and obvious to find. And so target sheet, get range, and then our row 2, one row, and then this is gonna be data length, and then set values. And then because our data is a single array, right, is like this, instead of like this, when we go back to set values, we're going to have to wrap it inside of that outer bracket. And so we can just do data just like that. All right. And so then let's look at deleting the row from here. And so I'm going to wrap this in an if statement. And here's the reason why is, let's say I've deleted a bunch of rows here, just like this. And so this is our only row of data. If I come in here and say pending sheet delete row, and then do that index +2, what's going to happen is it's going to delete this. And then every time we insert a new row, it's going to be that blue background. So it's just kind of annoying. But what we're going to do here is we're going to say if index is greater than 0, we're going to delete the row. Otherwise, if index is equal to 0, instead of delete row, we're going to do get range. And this would be 2, 1, 1, and then I put pending sheet here. So let's get rid of that. Pending sheet needs to be just pending. And then pending get last column, and then clear content instead. And so if we got down to this row, it's just going to delete it and leave it blank instead of deleting the row itself. All right, so finally, we're going to do two things here. So one is we're going to send an email back to the requester with, hey, was it approved or denied? Another thing is whoever's clicking on this email, we want to give them a little bit of feedback to know that something actually happened. And so just like we did down below, we're going to get some data here. So let requester email, and this time we're accessing data here because we still have this data. So we have 1 for our email, and then let's do the other things here real quick. All right, so now we're going to create a little output, and we're going to do HTML for this. So we're going to use those backticks again, and then let's just do HTML, and then body, and then we're going to go ahead and do something like request details inside of a H2 header. Make sure we close that. So the way HTML tags work is you open one and then you close it. And the way you close it, you repeat the same thing, but you do a / before it, just like that. All right, so we're going to do again our bold. And so maybe we'll copy that from here. So let's pull that back in. And then we have those same things there, so that should work. And then we need that status as well. And so maybe we'll do that status up top. So status, bold, and then status. And then let's do our new line tag there. And then here down at the end, now we'll just close our body and close our HTML. So because we can send HTML and email, we'll actually just reuse this for both the email and what we're going to return to our button. So our web app button is going to be HTML service, create HTML output, and then we'll use that output. And so what we'll do here is return. And so when they click on the button, it's going to do all these actions, and it's going to give them this HTML back. And so it'll tell them, hey, here's what you did, basically. And so before we do the return has to be the last thing in this. So before this, we're going to do mail app, then email, And then we can do our object here again, and then 2. This time it's going to be requester email. And then we can do subject, and we could do your expense report was, and then we'll go ahead and add a status here. And then finally HTML body, and then we can do that output. All right, so we should be pretty much done now. So we need a couple things here. We need our webhook URL, and then with this Google form, currently we're just assuming it's going to run, but we actually haven't added a trigger. So first of all, let's go ahead and just authorize the script. And so I'm going to do that from the triggers menu instead of here, because it's going to ask me for all the permissions. So go to the trigger here, which is this kind of clock or alarm clock icon, hit add trigger, and then we need to select send request or whatever one that you called it. That's going to be handling the Google form responses. And then down here from spreadsheet, we want to change this to on form submit, and then click save. And now we're going to get asked for permissions. So choose our account, and then this is just Google's legal disclaimer. So we'll go to advanced, go to approval workflow, and then it's going to tell us the permissions. So it needs to access Google Drive files, so it can attach those files, our Google Sheet, so it can access stuff there, access our form, and then send an email. So that way we can send and receive those form emails there. All right, so now we're just going to come down and click allow. And I'll take a second here, and you should see it pop up. And there we go. So on form submit. So that part's good. And then we should see a little security alert there. Just let you know that you approved that. And so now we need to create our web app. So that way we can do that. So we're going to do deploy and new deployment. And then we're going to come over here, do web app. And then important thing here is change this to anyone. And then we can put an optional description. You don't have to do this, but it is a good thing to do if you have a chance. Finish deployment, hit deploy. And there we go. So there's our URL. And so we need to copy this. Hit done. We need to paste this in here. And then we need to save. And then here's the funny part is we need to update our deployment. So basically the deployment is about this code here, is do get code. So normally you don't have to do this. If you just had the form response thing here, you wouldn't need this. But because we have this do get, we do need to update it. So deploy, manage deployment this time to update it. And the reason why is because this doesn't change the link, because we just put the link in there. So if we did new deployment again, it would change the link. So now we can do edit, new version, and then we could just say adding webhook URL. Hit deploy, and now we should be good. So this should be the same link. Hit done, and now we should be good to test. So let's go ahead and check this out. So here's our Google form. And then we can record this. So you just have to check this. This is, again, Google's thing of security. They want to make sure people are okay with what's happening. And so we'll just put in a name here. We'll select a department. So let's just say office. We'll do new printer. And then we'll do 3,500. And then we'll add a invoice here. And then let's hit submit, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if we have any issues. So that part's good. Let's see what happened here. So there's our request on our form submissions. Did add it to pending. So there's our ID, and then our email, name, department, purpose, amount, invoice receipt, and request sent. So that part all looks good. Now let's check to see, and lo and behold, there's our email. So let's click on this so we can see our invoice attachment there, and then we have approve and deny. And so let's just check out what happens if we hit approve. Looks like we're running on all cylinders. So there's our status approved, requester, department, purpose, and amount. Let's go back here. So sure enough, it just removed it from pending and added it to approved. So it looks like the only thing I missed here was I didn't add the approved date. And so let's add that real quick. So where did we add it? So right here. So data, so we need to add, where was that? Today. Grab that, copy, come up here. So we need to make sure it goes after this because this is where we're getting the time zone from. So I'll just do it here. And then we're going to do data push today. And then it's going to do the same thing for us there. So that's how we can get that approved date in there. So to get this paid date, so nothing's happening when I'm double clicking here. So I'm going to click on here, hold down Control, or I think maybe Command on Mac, right click and drop down. And then we're going to change this to is valid date and then reject input and done. And so what happens then is if I double click, now I can see that paid date. And so this would be a quick way to mark off once you've processed, paid, and cleared it out. And so to wrap up this video, let's do a couple of things. So first of all, that amount looks a little goofy. So what we're going to do is let's pull up ChatGPT, and then we're going to JavaScript for currency formatting. And then here it gives us an example. So let's come back up here. And so if we go like this, now we can come down here and do formatted. So this worked out for us because amount is what it's formatting right here. So we can just now just take this formatted and put it where we want. So one thing you could do as well here is, can you remove decimals? And so currently it's going to show up with decimal places. So if you don't want decimal places, you can do that. And then it's going to give you this minimum and maximum fraction digits. And so we would just copy that. And then we just put that right in here. Just like that. So this would give you no decimal places. We'll just leave it like this. And then let's look at, I think we have another one down here. So let's copy this. And then we just need to put it after amount. So maybe I'll put it right here. Format. And then we can do our formatted here. And then formatted here. And so we can go through basically and change this out wherever we need to. And so let's look at this email body here. So let me grab this. And then let me just do a new chat here. Can you help me format this HTML with Bootstrap to make it look nicer? And then maybe I'll get rid of, let me do format as HTML and then get rid of those there. And then we'll see what happens here. So now we can just take this and we should be able to put it inside of these backticks. So let's do that. Everything should still be in place. So at this point, now we've made those changes, we need to again update the deployment. So manage deployment. And then we could be formatting HTML updates, deploy. And then let's try one more run through to make sure everything's clean and good with our new format. And so here's our approved. So we're going to go back to requests and submit another response. And then if we go back to inbox, so let's just take a look at what this looks like right now. And then if we go back, there's our approval email, by the way. So there's our new request. So here's our original one. So you can see our buttons. There's the 3500. If we go to our new one, you can see there's our new formatting. And it didn't seem to do anything. I think Yes. Can we include the bootstrap? Oh, my fault. I should have checked that before I took it. Okay, now we have our HTML. There's our bootstrap. So now we get this in there. Here we go. Deploy again. And just for the heck of it, I'll run this back again. So let me just delete this. And then submit another response. So we'll just leave this one sitting here, and then we'll do another one. And then submit. Let's see if it fixed it now. So we should see new forklift. There's our new forklift. And there's our expense approval request. And we're still not having an HTML. So let me. Yes, can you make this email friendly? But in the meantime, let's go ahead and check this out, see if everything else works. So we'll hit approve. There's our request details. Come back. Our shelving is still here because we haven't done anything with that. But our approval, there's our newest approval, and our approved date came through. So that's good to know. And then we can close these out. And then let's copy this and see if this works for us now. And then redeploy. Updating HTML. And let's try this one more time here. So let me go ahead and delete that. And submit. So we should be flowing through again. There's our launch potential client. Come over here, expense approval request, and lo and behold, there we go. That looks a lot better. And so we can go back and forth with ChatGPT. If you're like, hey, I want to make this dark mode, if I want to get rid of the borders on the table, something like that. But now that looks a lot cleaner. And so let's deny this one. Make sure that works as well. So there's denied. Come back. Expense report was denied. I've come over here. It's removed from pending. It's not on approval. Here it is on denied. All right, so that's it for today's video on creating an approval workflow. In this case, we're doing like expense reports. This could work no matter what you're doing. You just have to make some tweaks based on how your workflow needs to happen. So make sure to check out the other videos on our channel for more tutorials on both Google Sheets and AppScript. And as always, have a great day.